Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Adobe Live. My name is Sin Lagos, and today I will be your host. Joining us today is Jesus. Hi, Jesus. Where are you streaming from today?
Hey Zen, how's it going? I'm streaming
Hey,
from beautiful Morgan Hill, California, south of San Jose. How about yourself?
that sounds beautiful. I'm in Austin, Texas.
Austin, nice. I haven't been
Yeah,
there in a while, but it's definitely one of my favorite cities in Texas.
I know I often hear that, so it's a good it's a good like note to the city, I think. And I'm just getting to know it, so we'll see. Um,
Nice.
i- if you haven't on the chat, by the way, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our new Adobe Live channel on YouTube to stay up to date on the latest streams and to participate on all the Adobe Live community has to offer. In the meantime, Jesus, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what project you're working on today?
Yeah, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jesús Ramirez. I run a Photoshop YouTube channel called the Photoshop Training Channel, where, of course, I teach people how to use Photoshop. I've been a professional graphic artist for, I don't know, almost 20 years at this point, which is crazy because it makes me feel old. But these days, I have been working mostly as a finisher for the Hollywood industry. What that means is that I finish the posters that you see on Netflix and Hulu and HBO and all of that, or in movie theaters. It's a job I've been doing for a little bit over a year now, and it's a gig that I got into thanks to another Adobe Live streamer, Lisa Carney. So big shout outs to Lisa. And what we're gonna do today is create a movie poster. And I was telling you before we started the stream that I have in my mind the holiday theme since I was working on a poster for CVS.
Mhm.
And I was hoping that the poster will be out now so I could show it to you guys, but I can't because it's not out. But we're just gonna create a holiday poster today. Usually I do more sci-fi, superhero kind of thing, which is what I enjoy, but I figure we would switch it up on this Adobe Live and do something a little bit different. But the subject matter really doesn't matter at the end. What matters is the techniques that you'll see that will help you in your creative process.
That's awesome. I've actually seen this show. Is It's really funny.
Awesome, awesome. And you're talking about the hacks.
The hacks. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you like to, we can move on onto my screen. I don't think my screen is showing yet. Is it? Is it showing? But again, in case you don't know me, my name is Jesus Ramirez. You can click on that QR code and get a hold of me through my website, YouTube channel, Photoshop training channel. Let me just skip all this stuff. Companies I work for, it really doesn't matter. But as I was saying, these are some of the movie posters that I've worked on recently. You were mentioning the Hacks show. I hadn't seen it up until last week. Somebody told me the same thing that you said. You should watch it because it's really funny. And I watched about 4 episodes back to back, and I did enjoy it a lot. So I guess I have to
Yeah.
catch up for season 2, which is what this poster is from. And another one that I just noticed it was live that I hadn't seen, and I'm sure it came out a few months ago and I just didn't pay attention to it, was this NCIS Hawaii movie poster. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this one, and let me just make the background black so that it's easier to see. The reason that I wanted to talk about this one is a lot of people don't realize that I may complete a file, but I'm not the only chef in the kitchen. There's other people in there as well making changes. So this poster I work with Lisa Carney on. And by the time it left our hands, this character here on the right wasn't there. So when I saw the finished poster, I was like, oh, that's a new person, because I spent, like a week on this, and then
Yeah.
it's a whole new person right there. So it's funny how, even after I'm done with it, they might change their mind. And also something else that I noticed that they did is they made this guy larger. So he's supposed to be behind this guy. This guy's like 6'3" or something. And this guy's not very tall. So they made his head bigger, pushed them up, and he just looks so weird to me. So it's so funny to see the changes that they make after it leaves my
Oh,
hands, for whatever
yeah,
reason.
it's such a common experience, right? That we as creators have. It's almost that relinquishing control. I think some folks on the chat here relate to that. Hi, Carol. Hi, Oliver. We also have someone here who says that Lisa also helped them into the business. That's so cool.
Awesome. Yeah, no, Lisa's a fantastic person. So if you don't know her, make sure you check out her website, lisacarney.com. She's got a whole bunch of training. I often say this, that not a, not to pat myself too much in the back, but not a lot of times do I see something in Photoshop that I don't know, or that surprises me, or that, blows my mind. And Lisa has blown my mind at least 4 or 5 times since I known her. So she's one of the best Photoshop users that I know. So she's incredible. So you should check her out. Check out her old streams here on Adobe Live. Actually, I've done an Adobe Live stream with her as well. She's done her own, and then her and I did one about a year ago or maybe 2 years ago now, during the pandemic. So you make sure to check her out.
Yeah, it's definitely important to stay in touch with your community, that those collaborations pay off in so many different ways. Also, just by kind of being in the same journey, I think that also just comes back, and like you really understand that you're part of this huge design community.
That's right. And we're gonna jump into Photoshop, or we're already in Photoshop, but into actually working in Photoshop. But the last thing I want to show before we do is we actually use a lot of stock images in a lot of the posters, especially for the background where the talent stands in front of. And as you can see, for the Hacks movie poster, they're all stock images, Adobe Stock. See that, stock.adobe.com. If you actually want to see that actual photo, you can just type that link up on the search bar on Adobe Stock. But the reason that I like to show this photo is because a lot of times people don't realize that the talent, of course, is shot ideally in a studio behind a gray background. That's ideal. That doesn't always happen. And then we have to come up with a background. Usually my job is not to come up with the idea for the background, is just to put it all together. And in this case, we used Adobe Stock images to put all that together. And you can see that the squares, like this red square, correlates to the image on top. The green one is, this part of the image, and the blue one is this part of the image. So we use
that's
Adobe
so interesting.
Stock. Yeah, we use Adobe Stock a lot. And by the way, I see Anika in the chat posted a link for stock.adobe.com/free, which is a great resource, because Adobe Stock has, I don't know the number, don't quote me on here, but it feels like millions of free assets, images, vector graphics, whatever you like. So make sure that you go on there. And then, if you're working on a composite and you need a background, just type in, sky or trees or whatever, and make sure that you hit that drop down to select the word free, or click on that link that Anika posted in the chat, and you can get free assets to use in your composite. So it's a great resource. Obviously, there's a lot more in the pay section, but you do get a lot of stuff for free. So like I said, we're gonna work on a Christmas movie poster. So I couldn't really decide exactly what I wanted to use in terms of characters, but I thought that we would do like a rom-com. So when you download an image from Adobe Stock, it comes straight into your library. And the great thing about Adobe Stock is that you don't have to license anything if you're not ready to use it. So in this case, if we decided that this is the image that we wanted to use for our rom-com, we could, always name your layers. That's something very important when working in a production environment, that everything needs to be organized. Because again, like I mentioned earlier,
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I'm not the only cook in the kitchen. So then that means that the next person needs to know what the layer is in case they need to add someone in, take someone out, adjust the hair or whatever it is. So in this case, I can type the word couple. And actually, what I have here is finishing action with a keyboard shortcut. And I created this action. And what this action does is, if I hold the Shift key and the F2 key, and by the way, this will only work if you actually create an action yourself, but notice what happens. I changed the layer name to -normal opacity 100. What that is the way that I like to organize my layers when working in a professional environment like this. Is I like to not only give the layer a name, but also let people know what the blending mode is, normal, and the opacity. So if this were like a shadow, maybe the blending mode would be multiply, and opacity, whatever opacity I set it. And that's because if I send you the file, Sin, and you accidentally, push a button and accidentally change the opacity and things are not looking right, you have to go through the layers and figure out what happened. So if you notice,
try to troubleshoot.
Right, exactly. So if you notice that this layer is, it's looking weird, and then you notice, oh, opacity is 50%, but it should be 100%, then you can just adjust it accordingly by using the sliders or by using the keyboard shortcuts. By the way, if you use a number pad, for example, if you press the number 2, it'll change it to 20%, number 9, 90%. And if you type two numbers really fast, like 2 and 7, it'll do, like 27%. 0 is 100%, and 0 really fast is 0%. So
yeah, I often use those shortcuts.
yeah, it's fantastic. Anyway, so we're just gonna go with this couple here, and the way I like to work, assuming, so this is not really what I would do professionally, since I'm the finisher, like I'm one of the people at the top. In other words, there's already a concept that's been approved by the client, it's already been approved by legal and everything. So if I were the designer, this is how I would start. I would start by just getting my assets in there. Obviously the talent wouldn't be stock photos. If they were the primary talent, it would be the actors, obviously. Maybe some background people could be Adobe Stock images. So in this case, I'm just going to license the image. By the way, we were talking about this earlier, and I guess I should show it so that you guys have a good understanding of how it works. Let me just open up Adobe Stock here and show you how it would work if you were just doing it from scratch. And now I'll confirm my license here. And this image here is Adobe Stock, right? So what I was talking about earlier is this drop down that reads free. You can just type in free. And for example, you can type something like couple, winter, or whatever, if you were trying to follow along. And then, this is what you get. Another interesting word that I like using when I search for something is I like using the word isolated, because usually that would give you like a, solid background, which is great for compositing. And maybe I only want photos.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, so click on photos, and then, once you're ready, you can license from here by clicking on the license button, and notice the word free. So these are all free. Or you can just click on the little heart icon to save it to your library. And what that does is it just gives you a watermark version, and which is great if you're working with paid assets, because in that way you can only license the items that you really want. Excuse me. The items that you really want, and the ones that don't work for your design, you don't have to license them and pay money for them. So that's why
it's a great step for like the pitching process, I think, also.
100%. Yeah. And that's a very good point, Sin, that when you're pitching something, you don't want to spend money on assets you're not going to use, right? So maybe you have a Christmas tree, but they don't want a Christmas tree, then you didn't spend your license or the money on the Christmas tree photo. Yeah, good point. But anyway, so this is the image here. And something happened. I'm not sure what. Notice this little icon giving us a warning. Usually what should happen is the watermark should disappear once we license it, but that's okay. I can bring in this one, and that one is the full resolution version. And once I brought that in, notice that it fixed the other one. So I'm not sure what that glitch was, but it is what it is. So there it is. So we're going to work with this image here. And at the moment, I don't think that I'm going to have the full body shot like this. Maybe I'm just going to zoom in and crop it in a little. But for now, this is what we're going to work with, just so we can visualize it. So we'll start by removing the background. There's a lot of ways of doing that in Photoshop. I don't like to spend time fine-tuning small details in the beginning, because we don't know what we're gonna need to keep or take away. A lot of times you spend a lot of time removing items from an image, but then realize that all that time was wasted because there's a foreground element that covers it, or it blends really well with the background because maybe the background that you're using is very similar to the original background. So you probably didn't need to spend all that time. So what I like to do is just do a very fast mask just to get things going. Again, a lot of ways of doing that in Photoshop. I like to just go into select, subject, make a selection, make sure that everything looks good. It'll take a moment here. Here's a trick. If you press the Q key on the keyboard, you can see the overlay. This overlay indicates the areas that are not selected. They will be hidden in red. So I'm missing part of the jacket here, and I'm missing this part of his jacket. So I can just add to that just to make sure that they're included in this initial selection. Hold the shift key, click and drag to add to the selection. Again, doesn't need to be perfect, but I do want to get all the main elements to make sure that they'll be included in the final design. So that looks pretty good. Click on the check mark, or I'm sorry, click on the new layer mask icon to apply that mask. So this is what we're going to start with. Also, when I was thinking about how to create the background for this image, I thought it would be cool if they were like in a nice winter scene somewhere in, with a mountain, a lake, something beautiful, a lot like Lake Tahoe, where I believe Paco lives now. But
Yeah.
I found this image on Adobe Stock, which I thought would be great. So there it is. That image I think will be great for the background. And one of the things I like to do when I'm compositing is keep in mind the horizon line, because it's very important. If you want to make sure that your objects and your scene appear like they're in that scene, perspective, in my opinion, is probably the most important. More important than color matching, more important than masking, more important than scale. Because you can have all those things right, but if the perspective is off, it's just going to feel weird. It's going to look off, and it's just not going to work. If your color matching is not good, if your shadows are not quite right, if the scale is just a little bit off, it'll be weird. It won't be good, but it won't feel as bad as if the perspective is off. So that's why I think the perspective is always the most important thing.
Yeah.
And what I like to do is I like to set my horizon line, and I don't have to stick with it. I just need to have it in my head so that I can place everything accordingly. So I'm just going to click and drag from the rulers, Control R on Windows, Command R on the Mac to enable the rulers, click and drag this down, and we can just say that the horizon line is probably right about here. What the horizon line, already had a guide here that I'm just going to get rid of. So what the horizon...
We have a quick question from Kevin here.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting too. Q only works, the shortcut Q only works if you hold it down. Is it a temporary thing, or does it stay in that kind of red?
It's not temporary. It stays.
Okay.
So if you have a selection active, you press the Q key. I'm no longer holding the Q key, and the overlay stays. And I can press the Q key again for the selection to come back. And actually, this is completely unrelated, but I think it's like a super cool keyboard shortcut that people should know. So a lot of times, if you have, I'm going to open up a new image just so I can show this example. I think this woman running will be a good example. If I go into select subject, I will obviously create a selection around the person running, right? And maybe my selection is good, but I want to tighten it up just a little bit. I want to contract it a bit. What most people do is go into select, modify, and contract. Nothing wrong with that. You can definitely do that, right? And this will contract the selection by 1 pixels or 3 pixels or whatever the number is, right? But the problem by doing it this way is that I don't know what 3 pixels looks like, right? So like I have to hit OK. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's what 3 pixels looks like. Cool. So then I can, undo, go into select, modify, contract once again and say, okay, well, maybe 1 will work. But you know what? 1 might not be enough, maybe 1.5. But then this thing doesn't allow me to do, it only allows me to do whole numbers. I can't do decimal points, right? So it's not as precise, and I can't really see what's happening. So a trick that I like to do instead is press the Q key to enter the quick mask mode, and then go into filter, other, and select minimum. And then now this will allow me to see what 3 pixels looks like. See that? 3 pixels. I know exactly what that looks like. See the edge? Or maybe 1.5. There you go. I know what that looks like. By the way, if you want to use decimal points and not just whole numbers, you have to change the preserve from squaredness to roundness, and that will allow you to use decimal points. So now you can get a visual representation of what that contraction looks like without having to guess. So maybe all I need is 0.7 pixels, and that looks great. I can press OK, hit the Q key again, and then we bring back the selection. So it's a much faster way to work.
Yeah. It's so interesting how many different ways there is to like select an item in Photoshop, and I think that used to be so tedious, and now it's like there's so many different options. Even if, like, for example, the most immediate one that you just used to be able to select the subject, but if you want to refine it, you have this step, which I haven't used before, which is really interesting. Entering that Q mode and just brushing in is one of my favorites. To be able to bring in a little bit of that, maybe an element that the AI didn't select, but that's so cool. I have another one in my books now.
Awesome. I'm glad it was helpful.
Yeah.
And by the way, let us know in the chat if you guys are enjoying these tips and tricks. Feel free to have the questions coming. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Kevin is saying that this is a great tip. Steve agrees. Yeah, definitely let us know if you guys have particular questions around Photoshop, poster design, or just the industry of movie posters.
Definitely.
Hmm?
Cool. So we're back with this image, and what I was doing is I was setting the horizon line, and the easiest way to explain what the horizon line is, a lot of people say is the eye level, and sure, that's your eye level, but in terms of design and photography and all that, you can think about it as where the ground plane meets the sky in your particular design or in your particular image. So in our background, in our background image, if we imagine that there was no mountains, no trees, and just a ground plane, like the water extended all the way to the end, and the sky went all the way down, where will they meet? It'll probably be right about here. And you don't have to be right, but our horizon line will be right about there. So then that if we want to make this background realistic, then we need to now set our horizon line of the image to the one we're setting for the background and build everything around that. So you don't have to be precise. By the way, I could have placed it here and I'll be fine. I could have placed it here and I would be fine. But just keeping it in mind is really beneficial, because if you don't, things are going to start looking really wonky and not very good. So you got to make sure that you have it at least in mind. And if you're going to break the rule, break it intentionally, not unintentionally, because then things are not going to look right. And if you break it intentionally, at least you have, you're doing it, and you can compensate by, I don't know, putting something in the foreground or background or whatever to hide any potential misalignments, perspective misalignments. Cool. So I like this image, so I'm going to license it. Again, if this was a real project, I wouldn't license it until everything was approved by the client and it was ready to roll. But in this case, I'm also the client, so I'm approving it, so I can hit confirm. And
oh, that's helpful.
Yeah. Cool. So if everything works correctly, once you license an image, it should remove the watermark. There you go. See, okay, so this time everything worked great. So this is how it's supposed to work. The watermark is removed, and now we're using the high resolution version of this photo. And there we go. The next thing we want to do is extend the sky. So I know I have a bunch of sky images because I download a ton of images from Adobe Stock. So a lot of times, instead of searching on actual Adobe Stock, I'll search in my libraries, because I'm like, yeah, I've already downloaded like 30 sky images. So I know there's good ones in there. So I'll just search from my libraries panel. By the way, I should have mentioned this earlier. You can go into Window and Libraries if you don't see that, and all your libraries are here. Click on this drop down and make sure that all libraries is active. That way, all the sky images you've downloaded on all your libraries will show up, and you can just scroll down until you find something that works. And
so I'm curious, so I can see that you start to develop like an asset library for all of your stock imagery. But say you decide to choose an image maybe a year or 2 years later, do you have to then undergo the same process of licensing it, or how does that work?
Good question. You don't. The ones that are already licensed, they're licensed, and I can just, for example, if this is the one I want to use, I can just drag it in here, and there it is. I can use it. Also, if you are on the Adobe Stock website, let me bring that back up. If you're on the Adobe Stock website, there is a section, I believe, license history. Here we go. You can click on license history. You can click on your little face there, go into your license history, and you can see all the images you've licensed here. And you can also search from here as well. So maybe you licensed a car or something, so you can type in car. Oops, I added that extra apostrophe there. Maybe that's why it didn't work. I don't know. But theoretically, there it is. There's one with a car. See, these are the cars that I've licensed in the past for whatever project. So you can go into stock.adobe.com and search for your licensed image there as well.
Ryan says, I also have a stock dump, quote unquote, in my Creative Cloud library, and I just drop unlicensed images there to browse through later. Adobe Stock is a great source for inspiration too.
Definitely. I completely agree with that. And I'm going to just rename these layers. Like I'm probably not going to take the time to rename every layer in the stream just because we don't have a lot of time. But since it's a habit, I just started renaming layers as you were talking. Anyway, yeah. So I have this sky image, and also, like, when you're compositing a sky into an image, you also have to make sure that the perspective matches, right? This wouldn't look right if I just made this super large like so, and then brought it down. Oops, I moved the guide and brought it down. And I know in this case we need a mask because so you can see what I mean. But the point is that if you scale something and it's not matching the perspective, the sky's not going to look right. For example, let me show you. If you select the mountain image, I can go into select and choose sky, and that's going to make a selection out of the sky. Notice that it's not selected the pixels on top because they're transparent. So I'm going to add to that selection so that those pixels are also selected. So now when I'm here, I can create a layer mask. But that doesn't look right, not only because it doesn't extend all the way to the top, but the perspective on the sky is also off. So what you can do is click on this link icon so that you can move the sky separately from the layer mask, or if you wanted to, the mask separately from the sky. The white outline, the focus, is on the mask now. If I click on the sky, it's now on the sky layer, on the layer thumbnail. With the move tool, I can just drag this up, but notice that everything looks much better once the perspective matches. So things look much better. So this is the sky replacement that I'm doing. I think things are looking pretty good. The one thing is I kind of do like the blue that the original sky had, so we can always Photoshop that in, right? And there's so many ways of color matching, like hundreds. And I'm not a fan of techniques, I'm a fan of results. So some people always use curves for everything. Some people always use levels. Some people always use hue and saturation. People always ask me what's better. It doesn't matter. Like, the results is what matters. So if you want to use curves, levels, hues, it doesn't matter. I use them all. Whatever pops into my head first.
Case by case. Yeah.
Case by case, exactly. So in this case, I think hue and saturation would just be the easiest. So I'll select hue and saturation. By the way, in the professional environment that I work with, if the layer mask is not doing anything, we just delete it, because again, you might accidentally paint something over it, which will destroy the final design. So if the layer mask is not doing anything, it gets deleted. Control Alt G on Windows, Command Option G on the Mac to clip the layer to the layer below. This means that this adjustment layer will only adjust the sky.
Applied. Right.
Yeah. So now I can just adjust the hue and the saturation, and then the lightness, and then this will make it just a little bit closer to what the original sky was. Not 100%, but it's okay. I just wanted it to be similar, and I could spend more time fine-tuning it, of course.
Yeah, General Kenobi,
name your layers. I'm sorry?
General Kenobi says levels are their favorites. Yeah, we all kind of end up using some that are go-tos, and that's also helpful.
And to be fair, there are some adjustment layers that are better for some things, and what I mean better is just easier to, theoretically speaking, you could do everything with curves, right? But there's something like I would never use curves to saturate because it's too difficult. It's much easier to just drag the slider. I use levels a lot when I want to clip the blacks and whites. It just depends, for me at least. Cool. So then what I'm going to do now is just place all these layers into a group, and I can just call this like mountain and sky. So we have just the top part of our design here, and it's looking pretty good. And this is where our actors are going to be standing in front of. And maybe, you know what, I changed my mind. What I'm going to do here is, let me think. I think I'm going to go inside of this smart object, because this is a smart object, and I'm going to recreate the selection here, the select subject. And the reason that I'm doing this is because I'm actually, you know what, I changed my mind again. What I'm going to do now is take this layer, and I'm going to unlock it, right? Take this layer and just drop it into our design. Oops. Into our design here, and it's going to look giant, which is what I want. And then to save time, I'll just copy the name here, paste. And the reason I went through all this trouble, and there's easier ways of doing it, I don't know why I did it the long way, is that I didn't want to use this cloud asset. I wanted it to be embedded. I could have also literally clicked on embed link, and it would have done exactly what I'm doing right now. So that's a smart way of doing it. I don't know why I went the long way. Sorry guys for taking you the long way. But right clicking on it and selecting embed smart object will convert the cloud smart object into a a cloud smart object into an embedded smart object, which means that
Oh, interesting.
this smart object is now inside of the document. It's no longer in the cloud, which is what I
Right.
want.
I
And
didn't
I
know
don't
you
want,
can do that. That's yeah, it's a different shortcut. I thought that had to happen in the beginning when you bring in a
yeah,
file.
no, you can do it whenever. And you know, like a lot of times things make more sense if I'm just like doing it procedurally, like manually. But I'm like,
Yeah.
why am I wasting so much time? I can just right click on it. Anyway,
Yeah, for
so
sure.
I did delete the mask because I want to create the mask inside of the smart object just so that I can have more flexibility and keep everything contained. So I'm gonna just do the select subject in here. And then I'm going to add to it because I already know I need to add these parts. And there was another part I needed to add, but I guess since this is the higher res, it did a better job. Yeah, it did a much better job on the higher res. Anyway, so I can create my layer mask. I can close it. Yes. Oops. Oh, okay. So this is an issue. This is why I was doing it the other way. I knew there was an issue. So when you do it this way, the smart object inside is actually a JPEG. So you can't actually do more what do you call them? More adjustments. Which is why I was doing it the other way. I knew there was a reason I was doing it the
Got
long
it.
way. Because when you convert a smart
Troubleshooting.
object from an actual layers panel, when you open it up, it's actually a PSB, a Photoshop big document. So a document that can hold more than, what is it, 2 or 3 gigabytes? I forget what it is, but it could be pretty large. PSDs have a file size limit of 2 gigabytes or 3, I forget. But the point is that PSBs, PSB for Photoshop big is what I wanted in there, and that allows me to make a subject selection and create a layer mask and then close it. And then that will apply to the image that we were working with. This smart object that I created by right-clicking on the layer, like I showed you, creates a smart object, but it turns it into a JPEG. See that? JPEG? So then with a JPEG, you can't have multiple layers. So when I try to save it, it's going to tell me that, it can't really do that. And it's a mess. So
I've definitely run into that. And obviously, the resolution of these images are really big. So the PSVs would be more a recommendation in this case.
yeah. And I'm just
Also, we
looking at,
have a few folks on the chat. Just want to say hello. Hi, Sean. And Sean got a whole welcome committee. Andrea, Susan, and RB saying hello. And for those of you who are just joining us, we are with Jesús Ramirez creating movie posters and also learning a lot of the behind the scenes tech side of developing all of these assets. So really interesting so far.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so what I'm gonna do now, and oops, well, I thought I had saved this. Anyway, I've already like been explaining too much that I kind of like also confused myself. So let me close some of these tabs so that we only focus on what we really want to focus. All right, cool. So again, I'm gonna open that up. This is the JPEG version, so that's not what I want. I accidentally closed the other file, so I'm gonna drop this in there, close this one. I'll keep the name though. I'll copy the name, delete that, put the name in there, convert it into a smart object. Yeah. And then now we're where we want to be. Subject, and I know it's not going to be a perfect selection, and that's okay. Oops, wrong keyboard shortcut. There we go. That's good. All right, so now when I save, it should create the mask and the smart object. There you go, perfect, that's what I wanted. So now I can decide, how my talent will be placed on the image, right? So it could be something like this, and you can spend all the time in the world figuring out how you want your talent to appear in the poster. For now, we'll just say that, we'll say that works, right? And the reason I kind of wanted to place them in the scene now is because I wanted to see what we need to construct in the bottom. And there's so many things that we can do here. For example, I know that in my libraries, I already saved a couple images. So I kind of like, like how there's this wooden panel here at the bottom and it has snow. So I can probably steal that. I could use this. Oh yeah, I could definitely use that. So again, right click on the layer and select license image. And by the way, like I can't show you the PSDs, unfortunately, but when you open up a PSD that is used in a lot of these posters behind the subjects, it's always a mess. It never looks good because it really doesn't matter. Nobody's ever going to see what's behind them, right? So I may do things that you're like, yeah, that doesn't look right. But when you put the person in front of it, nobody will ever be able to tell. So I'm just going to convert this into a smart object. Let me just make sure I click on the right place. Convert to smart object. There it is. And we just call this floor. And I'm not going to spend the time to name everything. By the way, something that I don't know, the reason that I made that into a smart object is it already was a smart object, is that notice the difference. Before, when I just had the mask, if I press Control T, Command T to transform, the entire layer becomes active. You can see the giant square here, and that's very difficult to like manipulate. But if I just convert this into a smart object, notice that when I press Control T, Command T to transform, it's just much easier to manipulate now because it's only showing us what I had on the mask. So then I can just adjust the perspective and make it fit in the scene. So I'll distort it, trying to get these wood panels to kind of like match the scene a little bit.
And then that mask still exists within the mask, so you can adjust it.
100%. Yeah. The mask is still there. And, I'm just using the controls here to adjust this accordingly and trying to, get the perspective as best as possible. And, something like that should work. Again, if you move the actors, it's not gonna look so good. But if you only see what's behind them, like between their legs and their body, then it's all good.
Like an optical illusion.
And by the way, in the chat, let us know what we should name this movie because I don't have a name for it yet. So you guys are gonna have to give us a name.
You get to name the movie.
Yeah.
A romantic comedy, right?
Yeah, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be I mean, that's the field that we're going for, but it doesn't have to be that.
Definitely not a horror movie. It's not giving me that.
Right. It doesn't have a horror movie vibe. Something that's done a lot in these posters is vignettes, and there's a lot of ways of making vignettes, but the way that I like to do them most of the time, there's two ways. I'll show you guys both ways. So one way is by selecting the brush tool and then just painting with black on a soft brush. You can soften your brush by reducing the hardness down to 0. The keyboard shortcut for that is Shift and the right bracket key to make a brush harder, Shift and the left bracket key to make a brush softer, and you can do something like that. And then what I like to do is just kind of stretch it, right? This is one way you could do it. Like there's so many ways of doing everything, right? There you go. And then just reduce the opacity if you need to, whatever it is.
That's more depth too.
Yeah, 100%. That's Home Alone 6. That's a good one. The Notebook too. Holiday with the Notebook. The other way of creating a vignette would be to use a gradient, and from the gradient editor, just make sure that you have black on the bottom on both sides, and then on the top right, make sure that the opacity is set to 0, and then it creates that effect you saw there. And then you can use the scale to scale it up, click and drag to adjust it. So either method works, whatever you feel more comfortable with. A lot of times I go with the gradient fill method, but there's nothing wrong with painting it. The problem with the gradient fill method is that it's very linear. It's like super straight. And if you paint it in, you can have more, you can be more fluid and be more organic. It just depends on the look that you're going for. In this case, I don't think it matters. So then we'll just use this, and I'll call it vignette.
We have a few names coming through. Say it isn't snow. Say it ain't
snow.
Ooh,
that's a good one. Say it ain't snow. Good one, Penny.
So it can't be Krampus is coming to town. Snow good. Up to snow good. That's a good one.
That is a good one.
Up to no good, but snow good.
Yeah. So
Snow way home.
Snow. We can keep track of them and then use the one that we like the best. So maybe you can help me keep track on what we will call this. To hide guides, you can press Control semicolon. Some people like to press Control H to hide guides. Nothing wrong with that. The difference between Control H is that you hide all the extras on screen. In this case, we only have guides, so it doesn't matter. But if we had different types of extras, like what do you call them? Why am I blanking on the name? On color samples and things like that, then they would also disappear. So that's, up to you. Control H makes everything disappear, all the extras. Control semicolon only makes the guides disappear. So whatever you want. Cool.
Sorry, frozen smiles came up.
Awesome.
That's a good one.
Before we move on and work with the talent, what I'm gonna do is just kind of, because I kind of want, like a lot of these movies, there's flares and all that kind of stuff. So let's add a flare. And there's, again, a million ways to create a flare. One of the easiest that I like to do is I like to just, just paint with like a, sunlight kind of yellowish, orangish color, like so. Just click a few times, then change the foreground color to white, make the brush a little smaller. You can use the bracket keys on the keyboard for that. In North American keyboards, the bracket keys are found next to the letter P, and then I can just paint with white, and that's my flare, right? And then I can change the blending mode to something else. Overlay could work, linear light could work, whatever you want. So that's one way. Another way, if you want to just get a little more control, is basically do the same thing but in separate layers, right? So you can create a layer, and then you can create your base color. So that'll be yellow, right? So make it larger, and then create a second layer, and that'll be like the center of the flare. I'll make it white and make the brush smaller. There we go. So now we have these two in separate layers. And the reason that you might want to do that, I don't know, maybe the flare could go over here on the left. I don't know. I haven't decided yet, but I can't really tell where the light is coming from. I think the light's coming from the left. But the point is that now that I've done that, I can change the blending mode on the group and do something like maybe like pin light, and then maybe bring down the fill a little bit, whatever it is. But the reason that I did it in separate layers is so that I can now select this base color layer, go into image, adjustment, hue and saturation, and then I can adjust the hue and really get the color that I want. So, completely up to you. This is all very subjective on what looks good to you. And that might be too much, right? I think it might be too much. So maybe
but it's interesting using the shadows and the highlights just to kind of start to blend all the environment together.
Yeah. Anyway, this is one way of creating a flare. The other way of creating a flare is to use Adobe Stock. You can just type in for lens flares on Adobe Stock, and you can see that I've already downloaded a whole bunch that I've used throughout the years. So then I can just bring one in, change the blending mode to screen, and then, place it into position. So maybe there's like, that might be better in this case, right? I don't know. I think that looks better. There might be some sun coming there, maybe put it in between them. I don't know. Whatever you think works best for your design. For now, we'll just leave it there. And then you can even use this one to like enhance it. Maybe the one that we created, I can put that on top and then just reduce the fill as opposed to opacity. I don't know, whatever you think works, but there's so many ways of doing that. Again, if you're just tuning in and you missed the part on Adobe Stock, let me go back into Adobe Stock here and bring this window over. There it is. You can go under free and select something like lens flare, like so. Oops, I forgot one letter. It's okay, it still came up. And you can just download these for free, and then you can use these in your design. So I think this is the one that I use, or one of these, but you can see that the ones that I've already licensed have the word license in them. So this is a great way of getting free assets for your composites. What I'm going to do now is work a little bit more on the subjects, and then we're going to come and fix the background a little bit. So now that we have our design pretty much where this is pretty much gonna be it. We of course may, increase the size a little bit if we think that the talent's a little too small, move them up, down. Of course, we'll do that. Those little small fine-tune adjustments. But at the end of the day, this is gonna be pretty much the design. What I'm gonna do now is double click on this couple smart object, and we can work on it to make the image look better. What I like to do is I like to create a solid color fill layer, set it to gray. And the gray doesn't matter, just place it behind everything so I can see what everything is looking like. And we got to work on the masking a little bit, since our final design is basically, I'm sorry?
Yeah, you can see it better on that one.
Yeah. Since our final design is not really going to show anything below their thighs, I'm not going to worry about it. So like, for example, like this part here, like I'm not going to fix that because it's not going to be shown in the final image. So basically everything above here I have to worry about. And what I like to do is I like to just double click on the layer mask to go into the selected mask workspace. From this drop down, I like to look at my mask in black and white and then zoom in just so I can look at the edges. And all the edges in people are different. For example, hair is going to have different edges in a shirt, but that's okay. For now, I'm just worried about the sharp edges. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to smooth the edges. I'm only worried about the sharp edges, not the hair at the moment. So you can see how with this slider, we smooth the mask. See that?
Yeah.
A lot of people will probably mention in the chat, isn't a vector mask a better way of doing it? And it certainly is. Vector mask will create the sharpest lines out of anything, but they're also a lot more time consuming. So a lot of times you have to make a decision. If it's a personal project, then do what you feel like doing. But if it's a project where you have a deadline, for example, a lot of these posters, they rarely give me more than, I don't know, 36 hours or something to complete. A lot of them are really fast paced.
That's really fast. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to sometimes sacrifice what's the best result for something that's like 90% there that will be much faster. So a vector mask will probably give me a way better line, but a lot of times I don't have the time to create those vector masks. So you have to make that decision. Because I know a lot of people, when I show this, they'll mention vector mask, and sure, I agree, but if you don't have the time, you don't have the time. Anyway, so with this slider, you can smooth the edges. With this slider, you can blur them, but I don't want to blur the edges in this case. But I do want to create a little bit of contrast, which will sharpen the edges a little bit. And you can shift the edge in or out. I don't like doing that from this panel, so I'll just press OK. If I want to shift the edge in, what I will do is go into Filter, Other, Minimum, which is what we saw earlier, and then I can use this to shift the edge and try to remove any of the white outlines that we might find in the image. So we'll call this good for now. I know the mask is not perfect, but again, we don't have that much time. I don't know how much more time we have in the stream, but
we have some time still. Yeah.
Cool. So again, like these fuzzy areas obviously are not going to work, but I wasn't worried about them. I was worried about the jacket mainly and the jeans and all that. And all this is looking pretty good. Here's a keyboard shortcut, Shift and click on the layer mask to see the original pixels. And in this case, I'm noticing that we cut into the pants a little bit and all that. So to fix that, I'll just select the brush tool, hold Shift and tap on the right bracket key to make a harder edge. And I'll just paint with white to just reveal these pixels that I really wanted to keep. And then now I can decide to either paint them away or bring them back. So I'm just going to paint them in, and I'm going super quickly here, so I'm not going to be super precise, but I think you get the idea. So there we go.
Yeah, that's you can always zoom in much more. 100%. Rotate the canvas sometimes helps.
Yeah, definitely. You can rotate the canvas by using the rotate tool here, and you can rotate it. Or if you have a Wacom tablet, you can do like the hand gesture. And if you have a touch screen, like I have a MSI laptop with a touch screen, and I can just, kind of do it like on a phone as well, over the screen directly.
That's helpful too. That's cool.
Yeah, so it depends on what you have, but you can definitely rotate the screen.
A little more organic.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, Sin, but I used to draw a lot when I was a kid, and one of the tricks that I learned to kind of find the mistakes in my drawings was to like flip the paper upside down and look at it, you know? And
Interesting.
so you can definitely use that technique here to like see something in a different angle, which might reveal some mistakes.
Right.
And I just realized that I'm spending way too much time on this. Like,
Or
you guys get
sometimes, yeah, you're no rush, you still have some time. But yeah, sometimes just like stepping away from it for a little bit, working on a different project helps me to just kind of gain a different perspective. And then I'll see it. And either you're surprised because it is so good, or you say, okay, well, it still needs a little work.
definitely. I'm going to disable this layer for now, save it, and I'll show you a trick here in Photoshop. I think it was Photoshop 2020 or 2019, or I don't know, something like that.
Okay.
There's a new feature under the view menu. If you go into flip horizontal, it flips the image horizontally, and this is just a preview. It's not actually flipping the image. So Photoshop is only showing, it's not distorting pixels. In the olden days, people used to go into image rotation and flip the canvas horizontal, and that will give you the same visual representation, but it was actually changing pixels. So if you're working with a very large file, that will take, it could take seconds, it could take minutes, because you're actually changing pixels. But if I were to save this and close this file, when I open it again, it'll be the regular view, not this preview. So
How did
this
you do
was
that
view
again?
and flip horizontal. And it just happens immediately, and it's just a preview. This is not the actual image
There you
you're
go.
flipping.
Okay.
So this is kind of like the same, idea of looking at an image in a different way so that you can
It's more immediate.
so you can find mistakes. So view, flip horizontal. Doing it this way again, image rotation, flip canvas horizontal will actually change the pixels in the image, and you're actually making calculations on pixels. So if you have a large image, it could take some time. So you don't want to do that, especially if you're just previewing something, not intentionally rotating or flipping the image. Anyway, back to our couple. So
we do have a question from Daryl.
Yeah.
So Daryl says, what DPI do you set your documents for, knowing that these could be used for many things?
Right. So at the very least, they're all 300. And I'm assuming the question has to do with the movie posters. So that's what I'm answering. If it's something that's just going to go online, then it doesn't matter, 72. But if it's like a movie poster, all the different studios have different requirements. But off the top of my head, I don't think I've seen anything less than 300. I've seen some that are higher than 300, but yeah, that's how I'll answer that, at least 300. And usually the way that I work is that like a particular studio will have a template that already has a color space assigned to it, a DPI assigned to it, and the pixel dimensions. So I have to work within that template. But I don't recall seeing anything under 300. But I have seen some that are much higher than 300, which to me makes no sense, but it is what it is. That's what they want.
It's also easier to scale down than it is to scale up. So
definitely
you start on that baseline. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, the problem is that a lot of the assets that we use are not, you have to scale them up because they're just not that high res. Because we're talking about like 8K or larger images. Anyway.
Wow.
The answer is at least 300.
Yeah, Steve guessed. I would guess 300.
Yeah.
Yes.
So something that happens very often is, we'll get an image like this. This is the talent. It looks great. All right, we love it. And then they'll say things like, well, you know what? We want we don't like the color of the jacket. Can you make the jacket a different color? Or can you make the sweater a different color? So
yes,
in this
we don't
case,
like the color.
I'm sorry?
I'm like, yes, we don't like the color, mostly because I want to see you do it.
Yeah. So again, there's a million ways of doing it. What I'll do is I'll just, start with a hue and saturation adjustment layer, but oftentimes I'll do a lot more than that. By the way, you can click on this icon. Earlier, I mentioned the keyboard shortcut, Control-Alt-G. You can click on the icon. What some people do that I never really do is hover in between the layers while holding Alt and clicking. I just think the keyboard shortcut's faster.
Alt Control-G or Alt Command-G. Yeah, okay.
Yep. And I can just click on this little hand icon, click over the image, and then make an adjustment to, and it's changing everything, right? I know it's not just the jacket. I'm going for his jacket, but that's all I really care about, how the jacket looks. Everything else really doesn't matter at this point. And, like, let's just assume that we want him to have like a green jacket, right? But then that's not the green we want. Maybe we want more saturation, and maybe we want it darker. So the problem of using this lightness slider is that it just really flattens the colors. So a lot of times I won't use that slider. Instead, what I will use is I will create a curves adjustment layer, and then just make an adjustment with the curves adjustment layer, and then make sure that the jacket looks the way that I want it to look. And this is going to be a little more time consuming, but we'll just say that this is the color that we want, right? So instead of clipping the layer, because we added a curves adjustment layer that gave us a better result, instead I will put that into a group, and I'll call it like his jacket or something. And now I can apply a black layer mask to this group. Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click. Now the difference between creating a black mask and simply painting with black is that we're actually inverting the mask. So let me show you what I mean by that. If we were just to click on the layer mask icon, it creates a white mask. And you might be thinking, well, we can just fill it with black, right? Black is our foreground color, so we can fill it with black. Great, same result. It's actually not. If you unlink this and you select the move tool, you'll notice that all I really did is made a black square. You can look at the layer thumbnail. Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click on the layer thumbnail, you can see the layer mask. And you can see that it's a black box, a white box, or I'm sorry, I made a black box on an infinitely white mask. And in a lot of times it doesn't matter, right? But if you're thinking ahead, a lot of times you want to create something that's infinitely black and only reveal a few things in that infinitely black mask, which is what I want to do now. So Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click. If I click on the chain link icon here and click and drag with the move tool, notice that no matter how much I click and drag, I'll never see white or anything. It's just an infinitely black mask. So now I can paint with white on that mask to reveal the effect on the jacket, right? So now I can paint on the jacket, and I'm going to go super quickly here, but this is what it is. And maybe it might work. I don't know. I can select the quick selection tool and click and drag over his jacket, and hopefully I can get it faster. And I know I got her hand there. I'll have to get rid of that. Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac as you click and drag to remove that. And I'm just going to try to get it as fast as I can.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely understand. Selection process is like an act of like love and care.
Definitely.
Just paying attention to the little details. It takes a little time.
100%. And I got to paint with black.
Penny says, I have to rewatch this whole thing. So much good info. This whole thing later. So much good info.
I'm glad it's helpful. And yeah, all these are recorded. So make sure that you check out the recording if you're just joining, or if you want to go back and see how something was done.
Right.
And
just learn at your pace.
Definitely. Cool. And now that I'm zooming in, I'm noticing that there's a lot of like noise. And I think the reason that was created was because on this hue and saturation adjustment layer, I believe we were adjusting the yellows. Yep, there it is. The range, it might benefit for me increasing the range. Yeah, that's helping to get rid of some of the noise. See that? See how I got rid of the noise by increasing the range? So these are the range of pixels I was targeting, and I just wasn't targeting enough of that range. But then that created other issues on the skin, but that's okay, because with the mask, we can just paint with black. And again, as I said earlier, I could spend a little more time fine-tuning these small details, but I don't want this stream to become just me fine-tuning a mask. But since we're already zoomed into this area, I will spend the time to fix the issues here.
RB says you can also use a layer and color blend and change the color to that part as well. So
100%. The reason I don't
workflow.
the reason I don't like doing that is if you just use the layer, a layer, and then change it, we'll select green, right? Let's say this is the green that we want, and then we can fill it, and then we can change the blending mode to color. That's cool. And I can apply the same mask, right? So you can duplicate a mask by holding Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and dragging it. and there it is, right? But now it's too saturated. If I want to adjust it, then I have to either select a new color, okay, well, that's too saturated. Maybe I can use this one and then try that. And that just takes too long for me. You could, of course, also go into image adjustment, hue and saturation, and then adjust it from here. But then if you're doing this, then might as well create an adjustment layer to begin with. The other method that you might want to do, if for whatever reason you really wanted to use a solid color layer, is go into the solid color from here, create that, and then apply that layer mask there, change the blending mode to color, and from here you can double click on the thumbnail and then adjust it accordingly, and that can also work too. So it's up to you which way you want to go, but all these
also the
methods
way
work.
it blends that color, that new color might blend with the color below it, might be a little bit tricky. So oftentimes I find myself actually creating a copy of that the photo and desaturating it completely, so all I'm borrowing from that base is shadows and highlights, and then you can add that color on top.
Definitely. And also to add to the point, and I'm sorry, I forgot who the person asking the question was. If because I'm assuming they asked that question because they saw me adjusting the range to try to make all the pixelation go away. If that was really a huge issue and I couldn't, adjust it accordingly by using the sliders, what I could do is click on colorize here and then just select green here, and then that would have taken care of the issue as well. So like there's a lot of ways of doing the same thing.
So many different ways, right?
Yeah. But the huge advantage I think about separating, not using the lightness slider and putting everything into a group with a mask, is that the curves also helps me much better fine tune the colors of the image. As you can see there, I can really fine tune
a little bit more on those tones,
exactly,
and not just the hue.
Right.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think even just looking at all the different options here, it's worth trying them all and checking out which one benefits you in your workflow or whatever type of project you might be working on. It might not be a poster, in fact, it might be something else. So just seeing the advantages and disadvantages of some might help you choose.
Definitely. And like I mentioned in the start of the stream, you may never be creating a poster or a Christmas scene or holiday theme poster, whatever it is, but learn the techniques because they could be applied to almost anything.
Yeah, right. You can reinvent them for different purposes. RB says, always use curves. So they're a big fan of curves. I think I've seen a couple people big fans of curves.
Yeah, like I mentioned
or
earlier,
levels.
like I mentioned earlier, like at the end, I'm not a fan of like tools. I'm a fan of results. So if you want to use curves, fabulous. I've used curves in this example, but I could easily have selected levels, and the advantage with levels is I can quickly see like, okay, well, I'm going to change my range of blacks. How dark are my darkest blacks? How bright are my brightest whites? And I can do things pretty quickly. Whereas the curves, it requires a little bit more thinking. I can,
right. Some are a little bit more intuitive.
Right. So it really, again, it doesn't matter. Whatever gets the job done.
It's
right?
It's up to you. Yeah. So we do have Ryan saying, I usually use Jesus' technique from the video he posted on how to get an exact color using solid colors plus levels. So
I think Ryan is referring, I've done a couple Ryan, so I'm not sure which one you're referring to. It might be the LAB color mode from the way you wrote that, but if it's not, then it's probably the one with a blue couch, which is a hybrid of what I'm doing now and something else. One of the comments in it now says more finesse with curves. I mean, that depends on how you define finesse, because levels gives you finesse as well. When you input a number here, you can just use the up arrow and you can just literally move one value at a time. So I would say that's a lot of finesse. I'm guessing what they mean by finesse is that you can specifically target the values on the line. Oh, by the way, for those of you that like curves, here's a trick. So when you have curves on the curves adjustment layer in the properties panel, you can use the up arrow key, the left arrow key, down arrow key, right arrow key to fine tune the points on the curve. And then you can use the minus key on the keyboard to go down to the lower point. See that? See how I'm just adjusting points? So maybe this is what they mean by finesse. And then you can use the plus key to go up the curve and then adjust it accordingly. If you add the shift key and then use the arrow keys, then you move at larger increments. So they both have finesse. Again, it depends on how you define finesse.
Umacorn is the person who mentioned the finesse, and they're laughing a little bit. We went deep into the finesse definition for sure.
Yep.
It's also Daryl says it's also reassuring to see your own process is similar to other professionals' workflow. So it's reassuring on that front.
Awesome. Let's leave the jacket for now. What I'm going to do now is save it and then see how this looks in our overall design. And this is looking pretty good. I don't know if I like the orange and green mix. Green. I don't know what would be a good color. I mean, we could also make it green or make it gray or something.
Do you notice in like hero at least superhero posters, movie posters, there's often a combination of like red and blue colors?
Yeah, 100%.
Very commonly.
The blue teal orange combination, they're opposing colors in the color wheel, so they're used often in a lot of summer blockbusters. I don't know. Should we make it black or darker? I don't know. I just didn't like that brownish color. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of do the same technique just because that's what we were using. So why not keep using the same technique, even though you don't have to? And then I can just paint it away. You know what? I changed my mind. That happens a lot, by the way, guys. I changed my mind and I'll do something completely different when I realize, why am I doing this the long way when there's probably an easier way? So then, yeah, that probably will work better. Yeah, that's much better. Cool. And then maybe make it, I don't know, we'll give them a gray sweater. Why not? And then, see, like in this case, since I'm only targeting that orange, I can be a little loose with my selection, and I know I'm going to have to fine tune it because of his neck. But the orange only appears on the shirt, and obviously the orange pixels on his neck. But I can create a loose selection and then not worry about the jacket and only worry about the neck. So I can orange shirt because I really didn't like it. And obviously gray is probably not the best color. It'd be better if I found a color that matches better. But I think gray will at least not make that ugly orange stand out as much. I don't know. And if we wanted to change the color later, we can. I'll just save it for now and go back into our working document. And this is what the image is looking like. And
yeah, I think it's also worth noting that if you make all these edits non-destructively in the way that you are at the moment, then your client can make a decision on the final color of the sweater without 100%. Having to start all over.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to show, because I really haven't shown it much on the streams that I've done Adobe Live in, is some of the retouching work that actually goes into the talent. I have an action here. Basically, it's just a frequency separation action. I'm going to play it. By the way, I'll show you guys how you can download this. But basically, after you run this action, it's going to ask me for a Gaussian blur. I like to keep the Gaussian blur between 2 or 3 pixels. It really just depends. What frequency separation is you take the details of an image and the color of an image, ideally, and separate them so you can work independently, and that allows you to create better composites. When it comes to images, because I've seen people explain frequency as sine waves, which I guess theoretically it is true, but when it comes to images, we're not talking about sine waves, we're talking about space. So a better way of like a better word would be spatial frequency. And what that means is in a given space, how much variance of values there is. So the more variance of values, that's the detail. So that's the high frequency, because there's a lot of frequent changes in values. And then the color would be the low frequency, the lower the values that would change less often, less frequent. So that would be the low frequency. That's technically what we're doing. And we have these layers here that were created to show that. And you'll notice that when I disable this layer, this top layer, the detail sort of disappears. And when I come back and enable that, the detail comes back. So I can use that to make changes to the image and remove blemishes, remove wrinkles from shirts, just make things look much more appealing. And let me open up a page here. I actually just literally made this page on my website right before starting the stream because I wanted you guys to have access to it. But if you go into photoshoptrainingchannel.com/frequency separation with a hyphen in between, you will go into this page where you can download the Photoshop action I'm currently using, and that way you can use it in your projects. And I've actually used this same action for a lot of the posters I've created. But basically, once you have the action, and all you need to do is double click on the action and it will install in Photoshop, and you can just run it, and then you'll get these layers, high frequency, low frequency. And basically what you can do is you can come in here and then just adjust the image accordingly. So for example, what I like to do is I don't always like to adjust the low frequency layer. Instead, what I like to do is I like to either create a new layer or duplicate the low frequency layer and clip it to the layer below. It just really depends on what I need to do on that particular case. And if I clip it, I can just delete the layer mask because I don't need it. And if I clip it, what I can now do is make an adjustment, right? I can select the color that's found here and I can paint away, and this is gonna look terrible, I know, but I can paint that away, right? So let's just paint that wrinkle away. And I'm doing it quickly just to show how this works. And when I enable this, notice now that wrinkle is no longer on that sweater. See that? So this is before and after. And I still have some of that detail in there. See that? Some of that, the fuzziness of the sweater in there. So that's why you would use this technique. What some people like to do is they like to take this layer and use something like the lasso tool and maybe come in here like so, and then go into filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and then you can blur that until there's no more wrinkle, right? And something like that. Press OK, and there it is. And you can also come in here and paint, right? You can make a selection. By the way, when you use the eyedropper tool, make sure that you have something other than point sample. Point sample means that you're going to sample exactly the pixel that you click on. I don't like using that. I like using 5x5 average. Almost any other option will work better than point sample, because in that way, whatever pixel I click on is not going to sample exactly the pixel that I click on. It's going to look at the 5 pixels surrounding, like an area of like 5x5, and it's going to take all those pixels and average it to a single color. So if your image has noise, then it will be a more accurate representation of the color rather than accidentally clicking on a pixel that's like, like RGB or something. It's like red, green, or blue, and then it's not really the color, it's more the color of the noise. So then it's better to just get that average. So then that's what I did there. I selected that average, and I can just come in here and paint the wrinkles away. And again, there's a lot of ways of doing this, right? Painting, blurring. Some people like using the mixer brush tool. It just really depends on what you're doing and how much time you want to spend. But the point is that you can come in here and then just like remove these wrinkles, just because things need to look tidy and perfect and all that. And you can see the before and the after. So the sweater is looking a little bit better. Obviously it's not looking perfect, but it requires a little bit of work. Another thing that you can do with this, and actually now that I've already started, I kind of want to finish the sweater here, and I'm trying to figure out what will be the best way to do that. Probably select that color and then just kind of minimize the shadows there. Anyway, and this will work better with a Wacom. And for those of you that have seen me present before, for some reason I don't like teaching with my Wacom tablet, but my Wacom tablet is right here. It
takes up so much space sometimes, so I don't keep it there. But yeah, it's really helpful. Daryl says, I use this action, the action that for download, and it's so great.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Another thing that you might want to do with this is just increase the detail in the image. So for example, if I were to duplicate this layer, you see how much apparent detail there is. See that? So Photoshop, no program creates detail. I guess maybe if you not even AI, I was going to say something, but so what I was going to say was you can't add detail where there wasn't detail before. You can create the illusion of detail by taking an edge and making one side of that edge darker and the other side brighter, and that creates the illusion of detail. AI doesn't do that, but it also creates the illusion of detail. It generates, I guess, detail is the best way of saying it. The point is that in a lot of these posters, images look like this, where they're not quite so sharp, and you have to make them look super sharp. And one of the ways of doing that is just by duplicating the high frequency layer. And again, I'll clip it to the layer below just so that I know it's part of that layer, like so. And then what I can do now is hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click, and I can selectively decide what area will have more apparent detail. So probably his face and her face as well, maybe even his beanie here. And if it's too much, then I can maybe select like an off gray and then paint away a little bit. And if I paint it away too much, you can always go into edit and fade that lush brush stroke, so you can decide exactly how much apparent detail will be on there. So that's before and after. Once you save all of this and you go back into your poster, you can see what that's looking like. See that? See how that's looking better?
Much better. You can also see it on the eyes a lot.
Yeah, and if you like, whenever you look at a movie poster, you'll notice that they're super sharp. Like I probably, they have to tell me to like, sharpen things more, because personally I don't like things as sharp, but it is what it is. So you would have to do that on the entire image, including her, obviously. So let's add some of that. I'll paint with white so that we can just reveal all of that and see. She just looks so much sharper. And you want to add some on the hair, some on the fuzzies here, maybe even some on the detail on the jacket. Just whatever just makes the image seem more high quality, more high res. So like anything that has details. She's not wearing any jewelry, but if she had earrings or a necklace or something like that, and here I'm painting in the zipper on the jacket because that's like metal and it'll really stand out. Maybe on the button, maybe on the seams, whatever you think will benefit from having that sharpening effect to make the image look more high quality than it really is. You'll be surprised how bad quality a lot of these images are that we use in movie posters. I mean, I've been shocked. Some of them feel like they've been shot with like a phone because they're just so bad, and you have to make them look nice. Yeah, it's crazy. But anyway, so here I'm just taking the time to sharpen the areas that I think, again, will benefit from. In this case, some of the things that also we do that, not so much with men, a little bit with men, but definitely more with women, especially if they have nail polish, is create highlights on the nail. So we can't see her nail, I'm going to do it on him just so you guys can see. One of the things that we do is just create a layer, and then with white and a really, really sharp brush, just come in here and create a highlight, and the highlight, it's gonna be a little bit more difficult right now that I don't have my Wacom tablet, but it is what it is. And something like that, just like a highlight, and when you zoom all the way out, it doesn't look that bad. It looks like there's a highlight there. And if that one's too strong, you can always reduce the opacity, right? But it just helps create the illusion that this is a more high definition and everything's more perfect than it really is. Again, when you look at movie posters, you start looking at all those little details. Let me see.
Yeah, it also has it's the wow factor, right? Like a lot of drama involved in all the shadows and highlights, even if it's not a drama or it's not an action movie, still kind of has that like hyper look.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, if we enable this, it still shows, right? Because this is just adjustment layers. So the detail that we added is not lost. So If I were to enable these things, and I can just call this like him or whatever for, because that's the guy. There we go. Those are his adjustments. I can say, oops, it looks like I painted over his finger there, so I can
got frostbite.
Yeah, so let's fix that. Yeah, maybe that should be the name of the movie, Frostbite.
Yeah. Have we chosen? Do you want to choose a name?
I mean, I don't have any in mind, but if there's one in the chat that looks good, let me know.
Up
Anyway,
to Snow Good was definitely my favorite.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
That was a good one. So here we are, and this is what this looks like. It looks like I moved the lens flare down a little bit, but I can, put it back. Oh no, there it is. See how there's this line here? You could mask it out if you wanted to. What I think I'll do instead is I'll go into image, adjustment, levels. We'll use levels this time. And I'm just going to drag the center one to the right. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, right? Like, why am I using levels now as opposed to the other one? Because in my mind, it was easier to drag that one slider over to the right than using curves and creating a point and trying to figure out where that midpoint is. It was just in my head much easier to pick levels. So, I use them both. So, oh, by the way, here's a trick. When you press Control T, Command T on the Mac, make sure that this icon is enabled to enable the reference point. You can hold Alt on Windows, Option in the Mac, and click to move the reference point to a specific spot. Then Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac again, and Shift, click and drag to scale from that area. So now we can, say that the, light's coming here from the left. I can save that as well. Something else that I like to do is at the very, very end of everything, I can press Control Alt Shift E on Windows, Command Option Shift E on the Mac. I can call this one Final, even though we're not done, and convert it to a smart object because I want to get an idea of how things are looking or are going to look when I'm done. And so now that this is a smart object, I can go into Filter, Camera, Raw, Filter, because we're getting near the end, right? So I want to see how things are going to look now that I got a lot of it in my image. And from here, we can do all kinds of things. We can start with the basic panel to adjust temperature. Do we want to make this a little bit cooler, warmer, maybe a little bit warmer because it's like a friendly type of holiday movie, or we want to go colder and really drive home that cold feel, completely up to you what you do. In this case, I think I might want to just warm it up just a tad. Adjust the contrast if need be, maybe reduce the increase the shadows to bring in some of the detail in the shadows, reduce the highlights to bring in some of the detail in the reduce the highlights to bring up the detail in the highlights is what I'm trying to say. We can increase the texture, the clarity, whatever you think will help the image pop a bit more. As far as I understand, the texture slider was created because Adobe was trying to figure out a way to smoothen skin, but then by inverting that algorithm, they created the texture slider, or at least that's the story that I've heard. Clarity increases contrast in midtones. Dehaze removes haze from an image or adds haze depending on which way you drag the slider. Dragging to the left adds haze. Vibrance increases saturation in lowly saturated pixels and it protects skin tones, while saturation increases saturation equally amongst all pixels. So I can move this over to the right just to make those colors pop. The curves adjustment layer, well, you guys know how to use that. We've been using it already in this stream. Color grading, you can apply color to specific tones in the image, midtones, shadows, or highlights. I don't think we need to do that in this case, so I'm going to leave the color grading alone. But if we wanted to like really drive home like a feeling of warmth, maybe I could, make the midtones warm or something and, just adjust it accordingly. But I don't think we need to do that in this case. So I'm going to reset that. We don't need to do anything with optics. So I can disable, not do anything there. Under effects, I can increase the grain. I always like to add grain to images just because things can get a little soft when you're photoshopping things, and just adding a little bit of grain, maybe like 10 or so, just gives it the illusion that it's like an actual image.
Sharper.
Yeah. And
ironically, and
yeah, right.
It's interesting. It's one of those you're breaking the rule because it's usually opposite. You want to remove the grain, but in this case, you're repurposing it for a different reason.
Definitely. Something I didn't talk about was in the color mixer. You can select the color option here. You can use the HSLs, the same thing, just looking at things differently. I prefer color because it just makes more sense in my head. But for example, I can select greens now and then adjust that green. Maybe it's too saturated. Maybe I can make it darker. Maybe I can adjust it a little bit. I can make my final adjustments here. Same thing for the sky. Maybe the sky is not the blue that I want. Maybe I want that, cyan, maybe less saturated. So you can start making your final adjustments from the sliders here. Normally, I wouldn't control the oranges for the skin tone here. So for now, I'm just going to press OK, but you could use oranges to control skin tone. You can press OK, and now I have a better understanding of what my image is going to look like when I'm done. Something else that I didn't mention that I should have mentioned is under Camera Raw. You can, and by the way, since it's a smart object, I can reopen it again. And I can now go into the masking options here, and under radio gradient, I can create a gradient here on the left side, rotate it a little bit, and maybe I can enhance the highlight there by making it brighter and maybe making it yellow. I don't know, something like that, So that is just something that you can do as well. So the reason that I did all of that was just so that I can get an understanding of what my final design is going to look like, but I can continue working on it, right? So like, I know where I'm going now. This looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy, but I can now start working on all those smaller details. So I can go back in here and, I didn't do any retouching on their faces. So maybe I can now retouch their face. So for example, I can zoom in and just see, what I can adjust. So maybe if I wanted to, just kind of minimize a few of those, I probably wouldn't do this. I wouldn't, like, personally, I wouldn't remove anything that is part of them. If they have like a blemish, that is going to be gone in a week, or a pimple or something like that, I would definitely remove that. But something that is not part of the person, I normally wouldn't remove. But a lot of times with clients, they would ask you to remove something. So what you can do, one of the things you can do is you can, maybe select the patch tool. And I know it's going to look terrible, but just to show you guys. And you can make a selection and drag it to another area. And that kind of minimizes that a little bit, and then from here, you could probably do the same thing. And the detail, just do that. Again, I wouldn't do that, but this is just the way you can compare the two. See how it's not standing out as much. I'm going to undo that because I don't necessarily like that I did that, but I needed to show
an
a
example.
fold, and he neither of them have too many wrinkles. And
it's one of those where you have to kind of select what is important to remove. Kind of make up your mind about that, and then make that step in your process.
Right. And also, since this is a stock photo, I'm pretty sure that the original photographer who uploaded this probably did some sort of retouching, because their teeth are too, you could tell that they've been retouched, even though we haven't done it. So I didn't need to be very heavy-handed on the retouching. Oh, you know what? I just thought about something else. Funny enough, another of the things that are retouched are hands, to make them look softer. So if you have something like this, you might want to just paint in. Oops, that's way too much. Let me just make sure I have, usually I have pressure sensitivity, and I can just come in here and, soften the look of hands. But that's something that's also done, just this, soften a hand. And by the way, this is how you would also remove a shadow. See how I can technically remove that shadow away using this technique. In this case, it's not necessary, but, and I don't necessarily like to over soften hands, but what I'll do is I'll do something like what I just did there, and then I can just come in here and erase, and then go into edit and fade, erase, and then just fade it accordingly. That was too much, so maybe just a tiny little bit, like so, before and after. And again, you can spend all day fine-tuning these small details. Another thing that I wanted to fix because I'm sure some of you may be thinking about it, is the fuzzies here. The way that I would do that is by just taking a selection like this one, like so, and going into my mask, which is this one here. I'm disabling the frequency separation, so we don't have to worry about it while we do this. So that mask here, and I'm going to go into filter, other, minimum, and I'm just going to minimize that, bring it in something like that. And then I can use a number
to the step you did earlier.
Yeah. And I can, use a number of brushes. Oh, actually, I'm actually using a new version of a new installation of Photoshop. So I haven't installed my brushes here, but here's the trick. If you go into the drop-down menu here and select legacy brushes, press OK. Then you have all these brushes that for whatever reason, Adobe decided to hide. All those brushes, see that? And one of the brushes here is Dune Grass right here, created by my good friend Bert Monroy, who in my opinion is the best Photoshop artist that ever lived. Shout outs to Bert. But he created this brush, and Bert actually wrote this co-wrote the first book in Photoshop ever, like in 1990 or something like that. But this brush allows you to paint like this. But I don't want to paint two different colors. Right now it's using the foreground and background color, and I don't want that. So I can click on this and uncheck color dynamics. And when I paint, I just paint on the foreground color, which is exactly what I want. And also, I want to rotate this brush so I can flip it on the x-axis. And there we go. That looks cool. And I can rotate it from here as well. You can also use the arrow keys on the keyboard. So if I use the left arrow key, see how the angle rotates? And I'm just trying to find something that kind of matches the angle of this thing. Also, under shape dynamics, under control, if I go into direction, I can do something that's like this. Yep, that's exactly what I want, but on the other way around. Okay, cool. So I can flip the X here, and I'll create a new layer just so I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, this is gonna work, I think. I just want to be able to, and then flip it on the Y, and that should work. Why am I having so much? Okay, here we go. Now we got it. Yep, that's what I want. Sometimes you have to like fine-tune things until they do what you want them to do. Perfect, that's what I want. See that? See now that I have the direction and it just goes like this. It just follows the direction that I'm painting with. Cool. So now I can delete all these layers because I don't need them anymore. And I can do one of two things. I don't know what's going to work. Number one is I can select the layer here, the layer mask, and then just paint with white to reveal. See that? And I can try that several times.
Nice.
And usually I have better brushes than this, but I didn't have them installed in this installation of Photoshop. So I have to make do with what I have. And so this is one way of doing it. The other way of doing it would be to create a new layer and then select the colors that are found here and just paint those in like so. And then maybe put that layer behind. Oops, you know what? I'll do both methods. So one layer behind them, and then maybe select some of the darker pixels here so they're not all the same color, and paint.
That's a great hack. I usually try to recover those pixels that are in the back, but to have those brushes accessible. Do you have like a brush for maybe hair, curly hair?
I do. I have a lot of brushes, and one tip that I recommend everybody to do, and I haven't really been keeping up with it, is to save your brushes in your libraries panel, just for the same reason, because sometimes you may not
install them.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and the reason that this is a new installation of Photoshop is I'm using a new computer as well. You notice that when I went to Camera Raw, I hadn't opened up Camera Raw on this computer. But anyway, so
fresh.
All fresh. So when you double click on the zoom tool, that's what it looks like. It looks pretty good. I can disable. you know what? Something that I should consider doing is these could be a little too sharp. So if you just go into filter, blur, and blur, it'll just blur it just a tiny little bit. And I think that works great. See that? See how like now creates that depth? Some of them are very
Yeah.
sharp and others are not. That's what I want. And I can disable this, click on Command S to save, go back into our poster, and look at that. Looks fabulous, I think. And
You can really see it too, so it doesn't just kind of get lost in the background.
so that's what it was before. This is what it is now. And what I can do is press Control A, Command A to select all, Control Shift C to copy all, and then go into this smart object, paste that in there, and you can see the changes we've made. See that? Oh, it looks like I brought the wrinkles back, but you know, it doesn't matter. I can save this, and it applies that smart filter camera adjustment to what we've been working on. Let's see.
Yeah, do we want to include that now that we're closing in on time? Do we want to include the text on top, like the title?
Yeah. I was gonna add because I wanted to fix this area here, but I guess we'll do that after the text. So what should we call this? And by the way, while you guys are typing up the names of this movie in the chat, I wanna go into fonts.adobe.com,
Yeah, very handy resource.
fonts.adobe.com. And these are all the fonts that you can use with your Creative Cloud account to use on your designs. So this is a great resource. And a lot of people will say things like, oh, there's all these websites that have thousands of free fonts, and it's all great and it's great for personal work. But just like with a photo, the fonts online may not give you the license for you to use them in professional work. So if you design a logo and then give it to your client and it's using a font that you got off a free website that doesn't have the license to be used commercially, you can potentially get sued. And shout outs to my friend Von Glitchka, a designer. I don't know if you know him. I don't think he's been on Adobe Live, but he's a fantastic designer, has written books on Illustrator, makes fantastic work. I don't know an artist that sued more people in their life. He sues everybody. He even has a course on LinkedIn Learning on how to sue people who steal your work. So there are designers out there suing people for using their work. But the reason I'm saying all of that is that the fonts at fonts.adobe.com can all be used for commercial work. So you don't have to worry about any of the legality issues that come with using these fonts. So I'm not saying not to use the fonts that you find for free online. I'm saying to read through the license and make sure that you can
get
use
permissions. Yeah.
Right. So
be clear, there's a human on the other side that created that font. So it's just kind of worth paying it back.
I'm actually looking for my friend Von Glitchka, and he has something about, like I said, he's got a course on, if you're a designer and you want to like sue people, he's got a course for that on LinkedIn Learning. He doesn't call it like sue people or something. He calls it here it is. This is it.
I mean, it's a fair argument to have, right? Like just knowing how to defend your work.
Yeah. Copyright for creatives, protecting your work.
Unfortunately, it's like done pretty heavily on the other side. So it's
100%.
Kind of just good to know how to defend it. Yeah.
100%. So so if you want to learn more about copywriting your work as a graphic artist, designer, creator, I would highly recommend checking out my friend Von's Copyright for Creatives, Protecting Your Work on LinkedIn Learning. It'll teach you a lot, not only about protecting yourself, but also not necessarily protecting your copyright, but also being careful not to violate somebody else's copyright. So the whole point of this whole spiel is that with fonts.adobe.com, you don't have to worry about that. You can use it commercially. So that's why you wouldn't want to use Adobe fonts as opposed to a free resource, because you can be sure you're not going to get sued.
Yeah,
I mean, you might still get sued, but you're not violating anything.
It can be a little daunting, but it's also good to just be familiar with those concepts so that you're aware of the industry standards.
Awesome. Any names for the movie? What was the one
Yeah.
that you liked? I remember
We
liking it as
had
well.
Up to Snow Good. We had Home Alone 6. Say it ain't snow. We had
Say it in
Frozen
snow.
Smiles. Frozen Smiles. I thought that was funny because they are smiling quite
Yeah,
permanently. Winter Bob.
this is one of them, right? Up to no snow. I think I like that one. Do you like this
Yeah,
another one better than this one?
I like that one. I like
All
the
right.
pun.
I don't know what font we're gonna use. I don't know how we're gonna up to no. Okay, we can do a couple things. You can do a couple of things. We can,
Yeah, we have about like 10 minutes, so that's it's one of those challenges to
yeah,
choose a
up
font.
to no, and then snow could be like big. Oops, that's now, not snow.
Yeah, create a little bit of hierarchy there.
Yeah, and I don't know how you're feeling about this, but I think I may want like a um there's these what am I trying to say here? Why am I not a script font here? So you can have these filters here so you can see the fonts that you have installed.
Mm.
And then select the script. And I think I want the snow to be like a script. I don't know, like maybe like lower. I don't know, because don't holiday movies have scripts in their fonts, or am I just
Oh, quite often. And actually, there's this one script that I don't
which
really
one do
know
you
the name
like?
for. I was actually gonna note one that really bothers me because I see it in every holiday movie or
Uh-huh.
sort of a gender reveal or a wedding. So you got to kind of stay aware of the ones that get a little bit abused. So you don't
Right.
use those as frequently, and then go in and try to find those like treasured, unique ones.
Mm-hmm.
Still script, right? There's so many options out there,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. Ooh, Anika said up to snow good. I like
With
that.
the capital N-O. Yeah, I like that
Up
too.
to yeah, see, like now like I have to change my mind from like designing a background and foreground to like designing a like
Right.
essentially a logo. So it's like
A
my
different
mind is like,
muscle.
wait, what?
Yeah.
Up to snow. Oh man. All right. As much as I like that one, like I already had something else in mind. So I do like up to snow good much better, Anika, but I already wrote this down and we have like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do like on Adobe Stock is they give you access to a lot of fonts that have more than one weight. One of my favorite ones is Proxima Nova. I use it a lot actually. And this one gives you
Yes, it's a
access to
good one.
all these different font weights. So I can select something like thin and it's super skinny, or I don't know, uh, thin italic. I don't know.
You
Maybe
could
not.
also find on font.adobe.com sets of
Yeah,
fonts that are familiar to that like Proxima Nova style. So it starts to become something that you can use as a resource for sets of fonts.
definitely. And by the way, here's the trick. So like right now I was trying to like, put that in the center and trying to get that smart guide. And I'm not sure if it's here or where it is. So if you don't know how to center something, what you can do is select the move tool, click on the three dot icon, select canvas, and then just click here and it'll just center it. Or you can click here and center it
Yeah, I love
vertically.
that. It's
Yeah.
like an InDesign is very helpful. Use it
Yeah.
all the time.
So, you can now that we're putting the text, and I'm not 100% in love with it, to be honest with you, but it is what it is where we're at, where we are.
Starting to come together. I
It's
mean,
coming.
yeah, but when you think about where we started, it definitely looks drastically different. It's a whole scenery.
Definitely. Why isn't, let me see. Oh, I'm like, why isn't it working? Well, this is the actual final thing, and I'm trying to change the vignette because now I feel like it needs to be a little bit higher
For visibility.
for visibility, right?
Mhm.
And then maybe decrease the scale a little bit. I don't know, something like that. Up to nose, yeah. And then like we also have to think about like the colors that are in the design, and
Yeah. Another random resource that I've started to notice on Adobe Express, there's so many different types of
mm-hmm.
templates already that give you an insider on how a font can reach a certain hierarchy. So you can
Right.
always look at those and get inspired, and then maybe come in here and start to control kind of your choices a little bit more, but it gives you a foundation of where to begin.
Yeah, definitely. A good suggestion. Adobe Express is definitely something that you guys should check out. Okay, so for now, we'll call this kind of good, even though it's not that great.
We're so hard on ourselves. It's like it takes a little while to finesse
right.
with it.
All right. We'll call that good for now. And then we can just call this like name or something. There we go. And there we go. I'll save this. And this is more or less what it's looking like now. What I want to do is I want to try to get hide this issue here. And there's so many ways we could do that. So I'm thinking, let me just look at the time. So we have about 10 minutes?
A little less, yeah.
Excuse me. What we can do is maybe I want to try to get a Christmas tree in here. And I also want to hide this problem here. So I'm not sure how I'm going to fix it yet. And I also want to add a bit of snow. So the easiest thing to do is add the snow. So let's add the snow since it's up to no snow. So
yeah.
So the easiest thing will be to go back into stock.adobe.com. We're in fonts.adobe.com. So stock.adobe.com. So you can search for free and then just go into snow overlay. And if you don't want, if you want to get more access,
specifically overlay.
Yeah. If you want to get more images rather than just the free ones, just select all. So I'll just select all just to get more choices. And like any one of, it looks like I already licensed this one. So maybe I'll just save it to my library because I already have it. There we go. Let me see. I can just search for it. If I already have it, it's in here somewhere. No, there it is. It's probably this one here.
That search tool is handy.
It definitely is. So there we go. We have snow, and change the blending mode to screen, and you can just adjust these any way you want.
Definitely looks more complete now.
For sure. And what I'm going to do is duplicate this, Control J, Command J on the Mac. And you know what? That name is just too insane for me. So snow, and I'll call this one snow back. And
make it a little smaller.
I'm going to put that one behind our talent. I'll put it behind our talent right here. And then I will make it smaller, like so, maybe a little larger.
The little details, right? Just to create that depth.
Exactly. A little depth in there. And then the ones that are further back, I'm going to blur, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. That's too much, obviously. Yeah, something like that. And then the ones that are closest to us, I guess I'll add just a tiny, tiny little bit of a motion blur. Yes. I don't know which way I want them, but I just want a tiny little bit, just the hair.
Yeah.
Maybe like 4 pixels or something. 3 is good. Anyway, there we go. So now we have, and obviously we don't want any snow covering our talent's face. So I can create a layer mask and paint with.
Alessandra says, "Hey everyone, I'm late but passing by to say hi." And that's a great cue on. Remember, you can always rewatch these at your own pace. We learned a lot of little things today, so I highly recommend to rewatch it.
Cool. I'm not 100% happy with the snow, but it is what it is. And I'm just going to remove it from his face because we don't want snow distracting from our talent's face. And you know what? Maybe.
Do you ever create a big chunk of snow just so it looks like it's closer to the lens in a way?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, we could try that. Let's try that. So what I'll do is I like your idea. So I'm going to duplicate this, and I will maybe move it up so it's a little bit different. And then maybe just like this part here, Control J to copy just that selection. We can delete this because we don't need it. And then this right here, we'll just make it super giant. I don't know. There we go. Now we get a little bit more depth. Maybe it was too big, but I like your idea. And then you know what? I'm going to use this snowflake here to cover like my mistake there. There we go. Anyway, so we got all of that. The name, here's a keyboard shortcut. Control Shift and the right bracket key will take whatever layer or group you have selected and jump it all the way to the top of the layer stack. So Control here it is. Shift. I want the name on top. Control Shift right bracket key.
Okay.
And I'll do this. If you don't hold the Shift key, like for example, Control right bracket key, you just move the layer up one layer in the layer stack. So I want the name to be above this final piece. And now I can just disable the name. Control A to copy all, Control Shift C, and then paste that in here. Oh, I forgot to remove the wrinkles again, but that's okay. I can save this, and there it is. I'm not 100% happy with the snow covering his face, obviously, so I need to work a little bit on that. I wonder if we're gonna have enough time for a Christmas tree.
Yeah, maybe. How fast can you be?
I don't know. We'll add a Christmas. We gotta add a Christmas tree in here. Okay, cool. This is gonna be good. By the way, this is basically what we have now. Snow good. I'll save it.
Looks really good already.
Let's see. Where is that Adobe Stock page? Here we go. Did I misspell Christmas? I don't know. Probably. And then remember my trick, isolated.
Isolated, yeah. Or overlay.
And then make sure we're on an image. This one might work. I'm just going to look at a few. Like, do we want lights? Do we not want lights? I don't know. Oh, do we want snow on it?
Maybe more natural, right? Like those three last one. I mean, those three on the right. They look natural.
Like these right here?
Yeah.
Let's go for that. Why not? I'll take your suggestion. I'll click on license and let's do it. Let's work on these guys.
Alessandra says, buenísimo. LOL, great.
Thank you so much. Here we go. We got a bunch of trees now. This is great. So let's see what trees will match our design. Probably, I mean, they'll
nice.
They'll probably would work. I don't know. I'm gonna go for. Why am I having so much trouble deciding? We'll go with the one on the left. What do you think? Do you think this one will work?
Yeah, that looks similar to our color too.
Yeah, let's do that. Here, let's just focus on this tree without the other ones. And now the fun part begins. How am I going to mask this? Probably a channel-based selection. So, yeah, maybe the red channel, duplicate it, image, apply image, multiply. That looks pretty good. Maybe do one more image, apply image. Yeah, that's good. And then it might not be perfect, but everything here, all that snow needs to be black. I know this is not great, but that's all right. Super fast selection because we don't have a lot of time. Oops, wrong keyword shortcut. All right, this is going to work. I can feel it.
You're giving yourself a tight challenge.
Why not? All right, we'll call this good. I'm sure it's not perfect, but it is what it is. Control I to invert, make a selection out of that. There's our tree. Go into our day one composite here. Drop this guy in here. Let's see. Okay, there it is. Cool. So I'm gonna bring this down behind them, maybe behind the snow as well. And you know, we're gonna use it like this because I kind of want to hide the mistake there. So I'm going to just place it there.
Nice.
I'm going to disable that for now. So because I
Just
want to see
adds
this.
more dimension there.
Yeah, I'm really, really unhappy with how I masked it, but it is what it is what
That's
we have.
okay. We're definitely out of time, I would say, unfortunately. But we do still have tomorrow, so I'm excited about that. I think we did so much already. I'm like really intrigued at so many different steps that you shared with us today. So thank you, everyone. We will be back tomorrow for a 9:30 a.m. Pacific for part 2. So join us as Jesus creates a new movie poster using Photoshop. Also, stay tuned and join Amy Hood from Hoodspot Design at the Typography Bootcamp. And immediately following that, join brand director Diana Jacobs-Skoba on Adobe Live as she shows you how to create branding for a virtual business using Illustrator and Photoshop. So till then.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.